name's Tim McCullough. I'm the store director at 552 United Supermarkets. I was at a store where our shopping carts were disappearing on us very fast. It allowed us to maintain our shopping carts, keep them in the store, and also was as theft deterrent. It's just a system that you don't have to maintain or monitor, but it's always doing its job. It's good to have a system that's actually out there watching without you having to do anything. Another set of eyes, another tool for us to use. We didn't have to worry about if something happened. It alerted us to anything that was going on. It was just it's a good system.
Hello, I'm Gus Downing, publisher and editor of the D&D Daily, and this is the LP News Network. We're here today in New York City at the NRF's Big Show with Bob Moraca, CPP, CFE, MBA, and Vice President Loss Prevention for the NRF, and Dan Faketty, Vice President Asset Protection for Southeastern Grocers, and the current NRF LP Council chairperson and long-term member of the council. The NRF is the world's largest retail trade association representing discount and department stores, home goods and specialty stores, Main Street merchants, grocers, wholesalers, chain restaurants, and internet retailers from the United States in more than 45 countries. Retail is the nation's largest private sector employer, supporting 1 in 4 U.S. jobs, and that's 42 million Americans. The NRF's loss prevention community works with retail LP professionals, law enforcement, and government agencies to protect retailers, people, assets, reputations, and brands. Led by Bob Moraca and the LP Council, comprised of retail senior leaders from across the nation, the NRF provides research and preparedness guides, coordinates industry initiatives, works with various government branches and groups on legislative issues and security issues, provides a voice for the industry with various media groups, and reports industry news through their various media outlets and on the D&D Daily itself. The NRF Protect annual LP conference is the largest event of its kind in the nation and is the leading retail-specific event for those who protect retail brands, assets, people, and profits. The conference draws attendees from a wide range of fields, including loss prevention, asset protection, IT, and cybersecurity. Gentlemen, Bob, Dan, thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Gus. Thank you, Gus.
You know, Bob, can you share with us some of the history about NRF and NRF Protect and how it's evolved in being really the leading conference of its kind?
I sure can, Gus. Thanks for the opportunity. I'll tell you, it's over 25 years that this event's been going on, and it's been the premier loss prevention, asset protection, education event over time. And it was called a number of things over the years. More recently, before we went to the NRF Protect, it was the Loss Prevention Council or Educational Conference and Expo. Mm-hmm. Had a big long name, and people understood it when they heard NRF if you went. But what we found over the years was about 1/3 of the attendees every year are new, or first-time attendees. So, it started off 25 years ago with 100 people to 200. Now it's in the thousands. We expect about 3,000 people at our upcoming event at the Dallas Texan at the Gaylord in June. But 4 years ago, actually 5 years ago when I came in, we talked about rebranding at the NRF. So we did a focus group. We talked to all the LP executives on the council and came up with a number of different options, and they chose NRF Protect. Because it came to the essence, what do we really do? LP has, I always call it this crisis, or this identity crisis. It's loss prevention, it's asset protection, it's corporate security, it's all these different titles. But what do we all do at the end of the day, right? We protect our assets, our people, our brands. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, it came to be that NRF Protect, and we've grown it. We've added an emerging leaders component workshop every year. We used to have separate an executive afternoon that was on standing on its own. I think it was in April every year, different from when the event was. We joined those together, so now the first afternoon is the executive afternoon. Just due to the changes in the industry, people don't have the budgets that they once had, so at the end of the day, we've kind of got this one-time event, take 2.5 days in June, and we network, we work with each other, and as everyone knows, it's all about networking, right? If you're around me long enough, you'll hear me say, your net worth will determine your network will determine your net worth in this business. It's all about networking. So that's the NRF Protect, and it's in our 5th year using that modicum. And like I said, we've grown it and added some new components, so we're excited.
Sure. The NRF provides a number of LP-specific research studies and preparedness guides. Can you walk us through those and give us a feel for the impact that they have and how many you do?
Yeah, you know what, Gus? It's all about the volunteer leadership at NRF. We're fortunate to have folks like Dan, the vice presidents of the major companies that join us, and it's their family first, and it's their real job, and then they give time to the NRF, and they give to the industry. And if you talk to any one of them, they'll say, giving to the industry, they get more back in return than you'd ever imagine. And their heart and soul are in this industry. They're passionate about it. So when we're looking at the leadership and how we do those things, we do the Organized Retail Crime Survey, the National Retail Security Survey with Dr. Hollinger, who's now retired. He's emeritus professor now. And those are the two main pieces we do. Then we do a piece on research in return fraud. And return fraud, as we all know, is another big issue. That's a $9 billion loss. That's the whole revenue of the National Football League in a year, if you think about it in terms of what that costs. ORC is $30 billion to the industry, and it's all pieced together. So these are real issues that are going to sometimes make or break. We all remember Walmart a few years back when they had some bad quarters. Where they tell the media? We're having losses out of our structures, and we're leaking profits. So they tighten that up, and obviously they're doing better. So we have active shooter response guidelines, large crowd crowd control guidelines for the holiday issues. We've got background checks, all the different components to the LP or asset protection jobs, where you can get some guidelines and then take those guidelines and customize it to your entity, your business.
If I can interject as well, because I think that this is an important point. In addition to the standard research that is done through NRF, when industry leaders step up to the plate and say we need additional information on any one topic, we go to the NRF, we have the conversation. One example of that, or one specific example of that, Gus, was back in 2012 when industry leaders really wanted to know about the education levels that were within our industry. We partnered with Northern Michigan University, NRF did at the time. We developed a benchmark study. That benchmark survey was actually sent out, and we had 88 different retail loss prevention leaders that actually responded. And again, this all had to do with educational knowledge, whether or not they had degrees, whether or not it impacted their pay ranges. And I jotted down just a couple of these on the plane, if I can read them before I got here today. Just to give you an example, this is one of the questions. An LP employee with a degree adds organizational credibility to my department. 71% of the respondents agreed with that question. 80% said, assuming a comparable level of experience, I am more likely to hire an employee with a bachelor's degree compared to another one without, 80%. At the corporate level, how important is having a formal degree in the hiring process or the hiring decision process? 87% said that it was important or very important, 87%. And then last but not least, in your corporate structure, how beneficial is a bachelor's degree in promoting an employee, promoting an existing employee to a corporate position compared to someone without one? 94% of our leaders all said that it was very important or beneficial. So that just gives you an example of one of the things that the industry was asking for. We literally took it through the Research and Education Committee. We partnered with a major university, Northern Michigan University, and we got this done. And as far as we know, it's the only benchmark survey of its kind in retail loss prevention, and it actually had 44 questions, and I've only picked out 4 out of the 44.
And I would say that 20 years ago, that wasn't the case.
Well, we didn't have a benchmark back then, but my guess is you're probably right.
Right. You know, Bob, let's talk about the role of the NRF LP effort itself on a macro scale and the value it adds to the industry beyond the research studies and such, and the various LP Council committees and what they do.
Yeah, you know what, Gus, we've got 7 separate committees besides the LP Council. Actually, there's 8 because there's an executive committee that Dan and a couple of the senior execs that are on, the vice chairs. They really help lead and drive what we're doing. But you've got the Women in Loss Prevention event. We're very proud of that organization. It started some time ago. It has a mentoring program. We had a Women in LP breakfast every year at Protect. We moved that to an hour-and-a-half luncheon with guest speakers talking about those issues that are important to the diversity of the group. And it's been very successful. Matter of fact, so successful, NRF is now mimicking what we've done in LP, and they're creating kind of a women drive retail move enterprise-wide, across retail, based on our experience. So we're right out there leading in that. So then we talk about the content committee for NRF Protect. You know, our Protect event is built by LP executives for LP executives. Or I take that back, at every level, you know, emerging leaders on up to the executive level. So we got the education and research committee that Dan just spoke about. We do those surveys I spoke about, but then ad hoc, there's an emerging issue, we're on it. We help work with that. We have the legislative committee that helps us try to work on ORC legislation at the federal level and then help those states. As you know, in your effort and NRF's effort and all the entities, we're 34 states, I believe now, that have legislation, so we work with the state level. And then we've got an awards committee and a diversity committee. We always give those awards every year. Our Ring of Excellence is the premier award. I call it the LP Hall of Fame. And frankly, we're very proud of that work. So those 7 committees are very active, and as new ideas come in, we work them.
So it's all the 40-plus members of the council basically populating these committees and then going out there and doing the work of the various committees, obviously.
Well, you know, I'd take that back because like the ORC caucus, we've got over 800 women, so it's not all the executive anymore. And I forgot one, the most important probably, the ORC Investigators Network. We have 1,400 investigators. So for those 2 committees, you can take anyone from at any level, because guess what? Those are ground up, you know, pieces of the organization. They're on the street. They know the changes and what's taking place. So that network has its own kind of every level attending.
You know, Bob, being that the NRF Protect conference is coming in June, and for those executives that haven't been to one, the 33% that we show every year that's new, by the way, that number was back 20 years, 30 years ago. People had shared that with me, so that seems to be in a pretty much repetitive number. That 1/3 is new every year.
That's about right.
So what are some of the highlights of the show this year, and can you talk to what an executive would experience and gain from attending?
Yeah, it's ever changing, which is the beauty of this event. So there's a couple of new things this year. You know, we had we're more and more working in conjunction with Homeland Security, and under commercial facilities, that includes retail and restaurant and food marketing, and frankly, the active shooter situations that are going on there. And the terrorism piece. This year, for the first time, come to the event from the main stage. We're going to have the FBI come in and do an unclassified global terrorism briefing, which is I don't think it's ever been done at any LP event ever. So that's going to be terrific. You know, we've got to protect ourselves not only from the active shooter, but active incidents. This year, the whole industry experienced these natural disasters, not just the Texas and Florida, where Dan's headquartered, and he can tell you, he could fill a whole segment on just what they had to go through. But then you had the wildfires, now mudslides. So all these natural disasters seem to come, you know, in bulk at any given time. It's feast or famine. We're going to talk about how do we respond better, how do we work with the agencies, how do we get, you know, we're pretty good at the emergency response and the crisis management and the incident command. But, you know, when we have to work with the outside agencies to re-enter the areas and get our product and get medicines and food and gasoline to the affected populations. That's where this networking with our law enforcement partners and Homeland Security and all those transportation groups helps. So we're going to do some sessions on that. Like I say, we take the most emerging issues and we add them. Then we have the executive afternoon. We've had Michael Hayden talk to us one-on-one in a small group. These are locked doors, no media. Very heart-to-heart, you know, of real issues that are going on. Michael Hayden, former head of the CIA. We had Chris Voss, who's the premier interviewer from the FBI for hostage negotiation, teach us last year about a whole workshop. And this year we've got some pleasant surprises for the executive. So you come there, but then networking is the key still. You find out what the other entities are doing. Dan, did you want to add anything from that?
Well, from a networking standpoint, I think it goes above and beyond just the networking. Oftentimes, I think people associate networking as, well, let's all just go out and have a bunch of fun. The reality is the networking component at NRF, just simply because it's one of the largest conferences in the entire world, gives anyone the ability to link up with any individual that is their peer group to identify a problem, or more importantly, even speak with 5, 6, 8, or 10 different ones. So if a problem manifests itself, or if an individual who's on the council or that is at the conference itself all of a sudden is given a new job. Let's say, for example, because our industry continues to expand, we're getting involved in more. If all of a sudden somebody knocked on your door and said, oh, by the way, I want you to work on cybersecurity, Or by the way, I'm about ready to give you business continuity. Oh, by the way, this is where NRF comes in handy, because all you have to do is either pick up the phone, go to a conference, or more importantly, if you're on that committee, I guarantee you're going to have 45 individuals that are going to be jumping through hoops, and I also guarantee there will be 10 or 12 of them that are already running that program and can help you take that information back to your organization and make an impact.
Excellent point.
It's wonderful, Dan. It's true.
You know, as the chairperson of the NRF LP Council, can you talk to us about the council itself and the work and value it provides, kind of extending on what you said, to the LP industry and the value it provides overall to the retail industry?
Yeah, I just mentioned one of them, but if you take a look, and Bob had mentioned, there are 7 committees. All 7 of these committees are working semi-independently throughout the entire year. And that's the legislative committee, the investigative ORC network that Bob was talking about, content planning, there's awards and recognition. The awards and recognition component of NRF Protect is all done by a group of individuals that work tirelessly all year long to put that together. We've got the education and research. The diversity group is a big deal, headed up by Keith White, and then of course we've got Women in LP. I can't think of a better avenue where you can go to find all of these individual committees where you can gain information and knowledge. In fact, I'll go on record to say that probably from an education standpoint, this is my go-to place. If I didn't have NRF, I guarantee I would not be in the position that I am in today, because these types of problems are not only impacting me, but if you look at the NRF membership, it is not isolated to a single retail vertical. It involves restaurants, it involves big box, it's discount retail, it's specialty, it's supermarkets, it's drugstore chains. And oftentimes what you'll find is that our problems and issues are the programs that we're trying to develop and implement that can make an impact from a profitability standpoint on our business. While they may be slightly different, there's actually more similarities than there ever are dissimilarities, especially if you get a group of loss prevention executives in a room talking about this. So I think more than anything, it really is the educational value and what you can bring back to your organization to make an impact on your profitability or minimize critical incidents and those types of things.
Well, and that kind of answers my next question about the need to be involved and engaged with the NRF LP group. I mean, even for the young executive that isn't a senior leader, okay? So we've talked about the senior leaders, but what about the young folks just starting their careers?
Yeah, well, again, if you take a look at the committees, and the committees, to me, if you're fairly new, if you are a high potential individual that has been identified by your loss prevention executive leader, it is not uncommon for that individual to pick up the phone and either call myself, I got one just last week, by the way, or they will pick up the phone and call Bob and say, look, I've got a high potential candidate here. I'd really like to put them on the council, but more importantly, they seem to have a specialty or they want a lot of knowledge with respect to one of these 7 different areas that we just talked about. We'll get them on the committee, we'll work with them and get them up to speed, make them feel more as comfortable as we can, and then ultimately put them in a position where they can make an impact with all of us, candidly.
And let me add one more example as it comes to mind. We have these committees, but we just kicked off an ad hoc committee, actually 2. One of them is executives in transition. And I have to tell you, anybody in this industry understands, the last 24 months, the 36 months have been very, very difficult. The mergers, the acquisitions, as well as some retailers just saying, we're not going to put all that effort into LP. Very short-sighted thought processes, but we've seen outplacement of the executives. So we have a small group now working to just help coordinate that effort to help those folks find meaningful jobs, and they help each other. It's really a good mentoring. And then secondly, with all the incidents we've had in our mall partners, very mall specific, whether it's the brawls at the mall or the active shooter situations and other emergencies that take place, malls equal retailers, right? We now have an ad hoc committee of mall-centric retailers working with our partners at Macerich, Simon involved, General Growth Properties, and just recently one other big mall operator. So that's, as things happen in the industry, we're the group that gets together and says, here's what we need. So we start these ad hoc level, and they'll probably grow to be full-blown committees over time.
Excellent. Dan, you've always been a big proponent of continuing education, and you help develop and support the only loss prevention bachelorette degree program in the country at Northern Michigan University. What advice would you give today, given the rise of cybersecurity, to an executive that wants to continue to further their education?
Yeah, I think from a cyber standpoint, what you're seeing in the industry right now is, in addition to just simply being a buzzword, it's real, right? I mean, it really is. The one thing that I would recommend is you can only control what you can control. And by that I mean, if you're going to go out and try and understand the Chinese hackers that are overseas that are trying to target, good luck, you're probably not going to, but there are specific things that you can control. If you take a look at cybersecurity and literally where those penetrations have been made, they are almost always occurring in a store or in a corporate headquarters where there's been a disgruntled employee. By the way, every one of those tends to fall into the lap of a loss prevention professional, mainly due to physical security that they're putting in their stores. Everything from locking server cabinets, having notification systems in there with specifically if someone were to enter that server cabinet, if it happens to be in a store or in your corporate headquarters. You have to understand a little bit about PCI compliance. It's really a big deal. And by the way, when you put yourself in a position where you're working with your IT partners, and when you show a legitimate need, I can tell you, if you want to take something off their plate, this is a big concern of theirs, a really big concern, because they're trying to deal with the network and they're trying to deal with the phishing schemes, but at the same time, every person that has ever come into any of the organizations that I've worked in have always been the most concerned about stores and corporate headquarters. And by the way, if you're actively engaged in physical security, which you should be in your own businesses, I guarantee you're going to fit in really, really nice with respect to those IT people, especially that chief information officer.
Certainly.
The other thing about degreed programs and more importantly, educational content and those kinds of things, I've been very fortunate that my organization has supported me, not only in NRF, but to get actively engaged in those, just like the research that we were talking about with Northern Michigan University. And one of the reasons for that, I think, is that the organizations that I've worked for, and I've been with NRF now in 3 different organizations, and by the way, 2 out of the 3 weren't NRF members until I had got there. They see the value almost immediately based off of the educational content that you can receive at these conferences, on these committees. But even from a cyber standpoint, Gus, I mean, there's really been a corner turned, I think. I mean, all you got to do is look at the D&D Daily. You're running things on cybersecurity from an information standpoint that's getting out to loss prevention executives all over the country, candidly all over the world. At the same time, that same type of information is actually being embedded in a lot of college programs. I know Northern Michigan University, for example, they have those in 2 separate classes that they run right now. And the only reason I know that is I was asked to go up and give a presentation on cybersecurity. By the way, it had nothing to do with Chinese hackers, had everything to do with protecting buildings and protecting access points within those stores.
Right, exactly.
And just to, and Dan doesn't even know this, but just yesterday I sat in on the IT Security Council meeting. It's our peers to the LP side. And frankly, Dan is so right. They talk globally about these giant hacking events that take place from belligerent nations. But they still say, and they used this yesterday, it's a good quote, 90% of the breaches take place between the keyboard and the employee's seat.
Exactly.
It's still, people are the issue, the main issue.
The insider threat is the driving factor.
Huge. Yeah,
absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. Gentlemen, thank you for being here today. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you, Gus.
Thank you, Gus.
Well, that's it for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. We'd like to thank you for watching, and until next time, let's keep them all safe out there.